The blazing Arizona sun had driven her to desperate measures, and when Nathan Kane spotted the young woman curled beneath his ranch house porch at high noon in July 1878, he knew she would not last another hour in the Tucson heat. He had ridden in from checking the northern fence line, his horses' hooves kicking up dust devils in the parched earth, when he noticed the flash of calico fabric beneath the wooden slats. Nathan dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle whoever had taken refuge in the meager shade his porch provided. The temperature had climbed past 100 degrees before breakfast, and now, with the sun directly overhead, the desert landscape shimmered with waves of heat that could drive a person mad. "Madam," he called out, his voice roughened by years of shouting commands over cattle drives and desert winds. "You hurt?" A face emerged from the shadows, pale despite the merciless sun, framed by auburn hair that had come loose from its pins. Green eyes blinked at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She looked to be in her early 20s, around his own age of 26, though it was hard to tell with the dust coating her features and the obvious signs of heat sickness making her skin clammy. "I did not mean to trespass," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was walking from town in the heat. I just needed to rest for a moment." Nathan crouched down, studying her more carefully. Her dress was travel-worn but had once been fine, and she carried a small carpet bag that looked like it contained everything she owned. "Walking from Tucson. That is 5 miles in this heat. Come inside before you cook yourself to death." She hesitated, propriety clearly warring with survival instinct. Nathan understood. A woman alone going into a strange man's house, it was not done, but this was life and death. "I am Nathan Kane. This is my ranch. I have cold water from the well and shade. You can sit in the parlor with the door open if it makes you feel safer, but you need to get out of this heat now." He extended his hand. After a moment, she reached out and took it. Her fingers were burning hot and she swayed when she tried to stand. Nathan caught her around the waist and half carried her up the porch steps and through his front door. The interior of the house was at least 20 degrees cooler, the thick adobe walls doing their job of keeping the worst of the heat at bay. He settled her into his most comfortable chair and hurried to fetch water. When he returned with a full glass and a damp cloth, she was looking around the room with obvious surprise. Nathan followed her gaze, trying to see his home through a stranger's eyes. It was clean and well kept, with curtains his mother had sewn before she passed, books lining one wall and furniture that had been built to last. Not what people expected from a bachelor rancher. "Drink slowly," he instructed, handing her the glass. He pressed the cool cloth to her forehead and she closed her eyes in relief. "Thank you," she murmured. "I thought I could make it. I started walking just after dawn, but I underestimated the distance." "Where were you headed?" She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. "Anywhere." "Nowhere." "Away from Tucson." Nathan settled himself on the wooden chair across from her, giving her space. "That is a story I would like to hear if you are willing to tell it." She took several more sips of water before speaking. "My name is Rose Sullivan. I arrived in Tucson 3 weeks ago to marry a man I had been corresponding with for 6 months. He was a merchant, or so he claimed in his letters. When I arrived, I discovered he already had a wife and 3 children. He had been writing to multiple women, trying to swindle us out of whatever money we might bring." Nathan felt anger kindle in his chest. He had heard of such schemes, men taking advantage of the shortage of women in the territories, but hearing it from someone who had been victimized made it real in a way that stories never had. "I am sorry," he said, meaning it. "I spent what little money I had on a room at the boarding house while I tried to find work, but there is nothing in town for a woman without references or family." The boarding house owner told me this morning that if I could not pay, I would have to leave. So I left. She gestured to her carpet bag. This is all I have left. I heard there might be ranches out this way that needed help with cooking or cleaning. I thought I might find work, but I did not realize how far apart everything was out here. Nathan considered her words. His ranch was successful, running cattle across 2,000 acres of desert grassland. He employed 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse and helped with the daily work. His mother had died 2 years ago, and since then he had been managing the house himself, which meant it was clean but sparse. Meals were functional rather than enjoyable. He could use help, and more importantly, this woman needed a place to stay. I could use someone to manage the house, he said slowly. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. The pay would be fair, and there is a small room off the kitchen that you could have. It is not much, but it is private and cool. Rose stared at him as if he had offered her the moon. You would hire me, just like that. You do not know anything about me. I know you walked 5 miles in killing heat rather than compromise yourself or beg. I know you are trying to find honest work. That is enough. He paused. I should tell you I have 3 ranch hands who live on the property. They are good men, and I will make it clear that you are under my protection. You will be safe here. Tears welled in her green eyes, and she blinked them back. I am a good cook. My mother taught me before she died, and I can keep a house clean. I will earn my keep, Mr. Kane. Nathan, he corrected. If you are going to be living here, we might as well use first names, and I am sure you will. She smiled then, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face. Despite the heat, sickness, and exhaustion, she was beautiful. Nathan looked away quickly, reminding himself that she was an employee and under his protection. She had been through enough without him adding unwanted attention to her troubles. Let me show you your room, he said, standing. You should rest for the remainder of the day. The heat will not break until sunset. The room off the kitchen was small but well built, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the vegetable garden his mother had planted and that he had struggled to maintain. Rose set her carpetbag on the bed with reverence, smoothing the quilt with one hand. It is perfect, she said softly. Nathan left her to rest and went back outside to tend to his horse and check in with his ranch hands. The news that he had hired a housekeeper was met with curiosity, but no objections. His men were all older than him, experienced hands who had worked for his father before his death. They knew Nathan ran a respectable operation. That evening, as the sun finally dipped below the distant mountains and the temperature dropped to something bearable, Rose emerged from her room. She had cleaned up and changed into a simpler dress, her hair now neatly braided. She moved through his kitchen with the confidence of someone who knew their way around a stove, and within an hour, she had produced a meal better than anything Nathan had eaten in 2 years. They ate together at the kitchen table, the ranch hands having taken their portions back to the bunkhouse as they usually did. The silence was comfortable rather than awkward, both of them too hungry to talk much at first. This is excellent, Nathan said finally, gesturing to his plate. Better than my mother's, though do not tell her ghost I said that, Rose smiled. She taught you to cook, enough to keep from starving, nothing like this. He took another bite of the seasoned beef and vegetables. Where did you live before coming here? St. Louis. My father was a banker. When he and my mother died in a cholera outbreak last year, I found out that he had debts I knew nothing about. Everything was sold to pay them. I had a small amount left, enough to live on for a few months, but no prospects. My father did not believe women should work, so I had no skills beyond running a household. She pushed food around her plate. When I saw James's advertisement seeking a wife, it seemed like an answer to prayer. He wrote such lovely letters about building a life together in Arizona territory. I thought it was the new start I needed. James Porter, Nathan asked, recognizing the description. Rose looked up in surprise. You know him, of him. He is not well liked in Tucson. If more people had known what he was doing, someone would have stopped him. Nathan set down his fork. I am glad you got out when you did. Men like that only get worse. I feel foolish for believing him. Do not. He is a skilled liar, or he would not have managed to correspond with multiple women without getting caught. You trusted someone who presented himself as trustworthy. That is not foolishness. They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily once Rose relaxed. She told him about growing up in St. Louis, about her love of reading and her mother's garden. Nathan found himself sharing stories about the ranch, about his parents and how they had built this place from nothing, about his hopes to expand the herd and maybe one day raise horses as well as cattle. When Rose finally excused herself to sleep, Nathan sat alone in his parlor, staring at the empty fireplace. He had not expected to feel this comfortable with someone so quickly. He had not expected to find himself watching the way lamplight caught in her auburn hair, or noticing the exact shade of green in her eyes. He reminded himself again that she was his employee, that she had been through a terrible experience and needed safety and stability, not complications. But as he climbed the stairs to his own bedroom, he could not help thinking that his house already felt more like a home than it had in 2 years. The next morning, Nathan woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He dressed quickly and came downstairs to find Rose already at work in the kitchen, the table set for breakfast. She looked well rested, the pallor gone from her cheeks, replaced by healthy color. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I hope I did not wake you, not at all. I am usually up before dawn anyway." He poured himself coffee and sat down. "You did not have to start working immediately. You could take a few days to settle in." "I would rather stay busy," she admitted, serving him a plate of eggs and bacon. "It keeps me from thinking too much." Nathan understood that. After his mother died, he had thrown himself into work, expanding the ranch operations and taking on more than was strictly necessary. Anything to avoid the empty house and his own thoughts. Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Rose managed the household with efficiency and skill, and Nathan found himself looking forward to meals and the conversations that accompanied them. She was intelligent and curious, asking thoughtful questions about ranching and the territory. In turn, Nathan found himself wanting to know everything about her, her opinions on books they had both read, her thoughts on the changing political landscape, her memories of a life completely different from the one she now led. The ranch hands quickly grew to appreciate Rose's cooking and her friendly demeanor. She treated them with respect, and they responded in kind, touching their hat brims when they passed her and making sure to keep their language clean when she was nearby. One afternoon in early August, Nathan was working on paperwork in the study when he heard a commotion outside. He looked out the window to see a familiar buggy pulling up the drive. His stomach sank. Judith Warner and her mother had arrived unannounced. Judith was the daughter of the banker who held the mortgage on Nathan's ranch. She was pretty in a conventional way, blonde and blue-eyed, always dressed in the latest fashions that her father's money could buy. For the past year, her mother had been making it clear that Judith would be a suitable wife for Nathan. And while Nathan had never encouraged the attention, he had not directly discouraged it either. It seemed easier to be politely non-committal than to risk offending the man who could foreclose on his property. He went outside to greet them, helping first Mrs. Warner and then Judith down from the buggy. "Nathan, dear," Mrs. Warner said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We were passing by and thought we would stop to see how you were managing out here all alone." "That is kind of you," Nathan said, even though the ranch was not on the way to anywhere. "Would you like to come inside for refreshments?" They were already moving toward the house, and Nathan had no choice but to follow. When they entered, Rose was in the parlor, dusting the bookshelves. She turned at the sound of voices, and Nathan saw surprise flicker across her face. "Mrs. Warner, Miss Warner, this is Miss Sullivan." "She manages my household," Nathan said. Mrs. Warner's eyes narrowed as she took in Rose's youth and appearance. "How convenient for you, Mr. Kane. When did you acquire a housekeeper?" There was something in her tone that Nathan did not like, an implication that made his jaw tighten. "Miss Sullivan has been working here for a few weeks. Rose, would you mind bringing tea to the parlor?" Rose's eyes met his for a brief moment, and he saw understanding there. "Of course. I will bring it right away." She disappeared into the kitchen, and Nathan ushered the Warner women into the parlor, resigned to an uncomfortable visit. Judith settled herself on the sofa in a way that showed off her expensive dress, while her mother surveyed the room with sharp eyes. "The house looks well kept, Mrs. Warner said, sounding almost disappointed. "Your housekeeper is quite young to be living here with you unchaperoned." "Miss Sullivan lives here as an employee, nothing more," Nathan said firmly. "And given the number of ranch hands on the property, she is hardly unchaperoned." "Still, people might talk. A young woman, a bachelor rancher, living under the same roof. You know how gossip spreads in Tucson." Nathan felt his temper rising but kept his voice level. Anyone who would spread such gossip would be spreading lies. "Miss Sullivan's reputation is spotless, and I will not have anyone suggesting otherwise." Before Mrs. Warner could respond, Rose appeared with a tea tray, her expression perfectly composed. She served the tea with grace, and Nathan noticed that her hands did not shake despite the obvious tension in the room. "Tell me, Miss Sullivan," Mrs. Warner said as she accepted her cup, "where are you from originally?" "St. Louis, madam." "And what brought you all the way to Arizona territory?" Rose met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I came seeking a fresh start. I was fortunate enough to find employment with Mr. Kane." "How very fortunate indeed," Judith said, her voice carrying an edge. "Not many women would be comfortable in such an isolated position." "I find it peaceful," Rose replied. "The desert has its own beauty once you learn to see it." Nathan found himself admiring her composure. She had to know what these women were implying, but she refused to be rattled. The visit lasted another uncomfortable 30 minutes before the Warner women finally took their leave. Nathan saw them to their buggy, enduring Mrs. Warner's pointed comments about how Judith would make such a fine ranch wife, and how Nathan should not wait too long to consider marriage. When they finally drove away, Nathan stood in the yard for a long moment, watching the dust settle behind their buggy. He heard the front door open and turned to find Rose standing on the porch. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I did not mean to cause trouble for you." Nathan crossed the yard to stand at the base of the porch steps. "You did not cause anything. Mrs. Warner has been trying to push Judith and me together for over a year. This just gave her a new angle to work." "She is very beautiful," Rose said, her eyes on the horizon. "She is also spoiled, shallow, and cares more about fashion than anything of substance," Nathan replied. "I have no interest in marrying her." Rose looked at him then, something flickering in her green eyes that he could not quite read. "Her father is your banker." "Yes." "Which is why I have not told Mrs. Warner directly to stop throwing her daughter at me. But I am not going to marry someone I do not love just to keep my banker happy." "Love," Rose repeated softly. "That is becoming a rare thing these days. Most people marry for practical reasons." "My parents married for love. They had nothing when they started, but they built this place together because they wanted to, not because they had to. I watched them for 20 years, and they were happy right up until the day my mother died. If I marry, I want that. I want someone who sees the work we do here as worthwhile, who understands that a hard day's work is something to be proud of. I want someone I can talk to who challenges me and makes me think. He paused, realizing he was describing Rose. I want a partner, not an ornament. Rose's cheeks had flushed and she looked down at her hands. That is a beautiful sentiment. I hope you find it. Nathan wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that he thought he might have already found it, but he held back. It was too soon. She had been here less than a month. She was still healing from James Porter's betrayal. The last thing she needed was her employer complicating her life. But over the following weeks, Nathan found it increasingly difficult to maintain his professional distance. Every conversation made him admire her more. She was not just beautiful and intelligent. She was kind and hardworking, with a quiet strength that had brought her through devastating losses. She laughed at his jokes and offered her own in return. She remembered small details he mentioned in passing, and surprised him with thoughtful gestures, like the way she had organized his father's old ranch records that had been in chaotic boxes for years, or how she had coaxed his mother's struggling vegetable garden back to life. One evening in late August, they were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. The heat of the day was finally breaking, and a slight breeze carried the scent of sage. "I have been thinking," Rose said, her voice hesitant. "I have been here almost 6 weeks now, and you have been more than fair with my pay. I have saved most of it since I have no expenses here. I could start looking for a place of my own in Tucson, perhaps a room somewhere while I look for additional work." Nathan's stomach dropped. "Do you want to leave?" "No," she said quickly. "But I do not want to take advantage of your kindness. You gave me this position when I desperately needed it, but I am sure you could find someone more experienced, perhaps an older woman who would not cause gossip." "I do not care about gossip," Nathan said firmly, "and I do not want you to leave. You are the best housekeeper I could ask for. More than that, I enjoy your company. This house was lonely before you came." Rose turned to look at him, the fading light catching in her hair. "I enjoy your company too, more than I probably should." "What does that mean?" She was quiet for a long moment. "It means that you are my employer, and I should not be having the thoughts I have been having. It means that I came here running from one situation, and I am afraid of falling into another that could hurt just as much." Nathan's heart was pounding. "What kind of thoughts?" Rose stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "Nathan, I cannot. It would not be proper. You have given me safety and security, and if I were to presume anything more, if I were to make you uncomfortable, I would have to leave. And I do not want to leave." He stood as well, moving to stand in front of her. "What if I told you that I have been having improper thoughts too? What if I told you that I look forward to meals not because of the food, but because it means I get to sit across from you? That I find excuses to come back to the house during the day just to hear your voice? That I have been fighting with myself for weeks because I do not want to take advantage of the position you are in?" "Nathan," she whispered, and there was wonder in her voice. "I am saying this badly," he continued. "I know it has not been long. I know you came here looking for safety, not romance, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. I am falling in love with you, Rose. I think I started falling that first day when you smiled and called my house perfect." Tears were streaming down her cheeks now. "I thought I was imagining it. I thought I was reading too much into kindness because I wanted so badly for it to be more." "It is more," Nathan said, reaching up to gently wipe her tears away with his thumbs. "At least for me." If you do not feel the same way, if I have misread this, tell me and I will never mention it again. You will always have a place here, always be safe here, regardless." "You have not misread anything," Rose said, her voice shaking. "I love you too. I think I have for weeks, but I was so afraid. I was afraid that I was being foolish again, trusting too quickly, seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was real." "This is real," Nathan promised. He cupped her face in his hands, looking into her eyes. "I am real, and what I feel for you is real. I want to court you properly, to give you time to be sure, to have no doubts." Rose's hands came up to cover his. "I have no doubts. I was surer of this after 1 week than I was of James after 6 months of letters. This is different. You are different." Nathan leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When their lips finally met, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise and possibility. Rose's arms wrapped around his neck, and he pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Rose laughed, the sound pure and joyful. "I cannot believe this is happening." "Believe it," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I am not going anywhere, and if you will have me, I am never letting you go." They stood on the porch holding each other as the stars began to appear overhead, the desert night coming alive with the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes. Nathan felt a contentment he had never known before, a sense of rightness that went bone deep. "What do we do now?" Rose asked eventually. Now I suppose we figure out how to explain this to everyone else," Nathan said wryly. "Mrs. Warner is going to have a fit," Rose groaned. "I had not thought about that. She already does not like me." "Let her not like you. Her opinion does not matter to me. The only opinion I care about is yours." "Then my opinion is that we should go inside before the mosquitoes eat us alive," Rose said practically, making Nathan laugh. They went inside hand in hand, and everything felt different now that the truth was out in the open. Nathan pulled Rose close for another kiss in the privacy of the parlor, this one deeper and more passionate, both of them reveling in the freedom to finally express what they felt. "I should probably go to bed," Rose said eventually, though she made no move to leave his arms. "Alone in my own room, because we are going to do this properly." "We are," Nathan agreed, even as he stole another kiss. "Even though it is going to be torture." "Good things are worth waiting for," Rose said, but her smile was mischievous. "Though perhaps we do not need to wait too long." Nathan laughed and reluctantly released her. "Good night, Rose." "Good night, Nathan." He watched her walk to her room, then climbed the stairs to his own, knowing he would not sleep much that night. His mind was too full of plans and possibilities, of a future that suddenly looked brighter than he had ever imagined. The next few weeks were both wonderful and challenging. Nathan and Rose were careful to maintain propriety, but their feelings for each other were obvious to anyone paying attention. The ranch hands noticed but said nothing, though Nathan caught them smiling more often. When he finally sat them down and explained that he intended to marry Rose, they expressed nothing but approval and congratulations. News traveled fast in a small territory, and soon enough, word reached Tucson that Nathan Kane was courting his housekeeper. The reactions were mixed. Some people thought it was romantic, a woman finding love after being wronged. Others, particularly those in Mrs. Warner's social circle, thought it was scandalous. Nathan was in town buying supplies 2 weeks after he and Rose had declared their feelings when he was confronted by Mr. Warner outside the general store. "Kane," the banker said, his tone unfriendly. "I hear congratulations are in order." "If you are referring to my intention to marry Miss Sullivan, then yes, thank you," Nathan replied carefully. "I cannot say I am pleased. My wife and daughter are quite upset. Judith had expectations." "Expectations I never encouraged," Nathan pointed out. I have always been clear that I was not courting your daughter. Nevertheless, my wife had hopes, and now you are planning to marry a woman who arrived in town under questionable circumstances, with no family or connections, to marry some merchant who turned out to be a fraud. It raises questions about her judgment. Nathan felt his temper flare. The only questionable judgment was James Porter's, and the only thing Rose is guilty of is trusting a liar. She is a good woman who has done nothing to deserve your suspicion or your wife's gossip. I am merely pointing out how it appears, Warner said stiffly. And I would hate for appearances to affect our business relationship. There it was, the threat Nathan had been expecting. Are you saying you would call in my loan because of who I choose to marry? I am saying that business decisions are based on many factors, including the character and reliability of the borrower. A man who makes rash decisions in his personal life might be equally rash in business. Nathan took a step closer, his voice low and hard. I have never missed a payment. My ranch is profitable and growing. You have no grounds to question my business judgment. And if you are considering calling in my loan for personal reasons, I suggest you think carefully. I am not the only rancher you do business with, and word would spread quickly about a banker who uses his position to manipulate people's personal lives. I doubt that would be good for business. Warner's face flushed. Is that a threat? It is a fact. I am going to marry Rose Sullivan with or without your approval. If you have a problem with that, find a legitimate business reason to act on it. Otherwise, stay out of my personal life. Nathan turned and walked away before Warner could respond, his hands shaking with anger. He collected his supplies and headed back to the ranch, fuming the entire way. When he arrived home and told Rose what had happened, she was pale but determined. I will not come between you and your ranch. If marrying me means losing everything your family built, then we cannot marry. The hell we cannot, Nathan said fiercely. I meant what I told Warner. My loan is current, my ranch is successful, and he has no legitimate grounds to act against me. If he tries, I will fight him. And if I have to, I will find another bank. Are there other banks? In Phoenix, yes. It would be more complicated, but it is possible. Rose, listen to me. I am not giving you up because of threats from a small-minded man who is angry that his daughter did not get her way. My parents built this ranch through hard times and drought and financial difficulties. They did it together, supporting each other. That is what I want with you. If we face challenges, we face them together. Rose threw her arms around him, holding tight. I love you so much. I love you too, and I am not letting anything take you away from me. Despite his brave words, the situation with Warner weighed on Nathan. He consulted with a lawyer in Tucson and was relieved to learn that his loan documents were solid, and Warner would have no legal grounds to call in the loan early without cause. Still, he knew the banker could make things difficult in other ways. The solution came from an unexpected source. A week after his confrontation with Warner, Nathan received a visit from Thomas McAllister, one of the territory's most successful ranchers, and a man whose operation dwarfed Nathan's own. Kane, McAllister said, settling into a chair in Nathan's study. I hear you have been having some trouble with your banker. Nathan was surprised but not entirely shocked. News traveled fast. Word gets around. It does. Warner is angry because you are marrying your housekeeper instead of his daughter. Seems like a poor reason to threaten a man's livelihood. McAllister leaned back in his chair. I have never liked Warner much. He is the type who thinks money gives him the right to control other people. I do business with him because he is convenient, but I have been considering moving my accounts to Phoenix anyway. Too many ranchers in this territory rely on one man's goodwill, and that is not a healthy situation. I have been thinking the same thing, Nathan admitted. What if we organized a group of ranchers to approach the Phoenix Bank together? Larger collective accounts would give us better terms and more leverage. Warner would lose a significant portion of his business, and the message would be clear. Do not use your position to meddle in people's lives. Nathan felt hope stir. You think enough ranchers would be willing to switch? I know at least 5 who have complaints about Warner's practices. Add them to you and me, and that is substantial business walking away. It would also send a message to whoever takes over our accounts in Phoenix that we are organized and not to be taken advantage of. Over the next 3 weeks, McAllister made good on his word. He brought together 7 ranchers, including Nathan, who collectively represented more than half of Warner's business in ranch loans. They met with representatives from a Phoenix bank who were eager to expand into the Tucson territory. Better terms were negotiated, and when the group announced their intention to move their business, Warner was forced to be civil or risk losing even more clients. Mrs. Warner and Judith stopped speaking to Nathan entirely, which he considered a blessing. The gossip in Tucson gradually shifted from scandal to sympathy, as more people learned the full story of how Rose had been deceived by James Porter, and how Nathan had given her honest work and later honest love. In early October, with the worst of the summer heat behind them and the desert beginning to bloom with fall rains, Nathan asked Rose to marry him properly. He took her on a picnic to a spot on his property where a natural spring created a small oasis of cottonwood trees. The afternoon light filtered through the leaves, dappling everything in gold. "Rose Sullivan," Nathan said, taking her hands in his, "you came into my life when I least expected it and changed everything. You made my house a home. You made me believe in the kind of love my parents had. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building something together, facing whatever comes as partners. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple gold band set with a small emerald that matched her eyes. It had been his grandmother's, passed down through his mother. Rose stared at it, turning her hand to catch the light. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you," Nathan replied, pulling her close for a kiss that promised forever. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch. The local minister officiated, and the guest list was deliberately small. Nathan's ranch hands, a few rancher friends including Thomas McAllister, and a handful of people from Tucson who had shown Rose genuine kindness. They did not invite the Warners. Rose wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair that Nathan had picked that morning. When she walked toward him across the yard, the late October sun setting behind her, Nathan thought she looked like something out of a dream. They spoke their vows under the cottonwood tree where he had proposed, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Rose with all the love and promise he felt, and the small gathering burst into applause. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Someone produced a fiddle, and they danced in the yard as the stars came out. Nathan held Rose close, marveling at how much his life had changed in just 4 months. He had woken up that July morning with nothing but a successful ranch and a lonely house. Now he had a partner, a wife, someone to share his dreams and build a future with. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her slowly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Rose replied, her eyes shining. "When I was curled under your porch, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was actually just beginning." "Our life," Nathan corrected. "It is our life now together." Their first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and make decisions together, but it was a joy rather than a burden. Rose continued to manage the household, but now she also rode out with Nathan sometimes to see the full extent of the ranch. He taught her about cattle and horses, about reading the desert signs that predicted weather and water. She taught him about keeping proper books, organizing the business side of the ranch in ways that made tax time significantly easier. By Christmas, they had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. They spent the holiday quietly, just the two of them, exchanging modest gifts. Nathan gave Rose a set of leather-bound journals for her to record recipes and household notes. Rose gave Nathan a new saddle she had been secretly commissioning from the leather worker in Tucson, with his initials tooled into the leather. "How did you afford this?" Nathan asked, running his hands over the fine craftsmanship. "I have been saving my wages," Rose admitted. "You kept paying me even after we were married, and you would not let me contribute to household expenses. I wanted to give you something meaningful." Nathan pulled her into his arms. "You have already given me everything meaningful, but thank you. I will treasure this." As winter gave way to spring, they talked about expanding the house. Nathan wanted to add rooms for the children they both hoped to have. Rose drew plans, and they spent evenings debating layouts and discussing what they wanted their family home to look like. In April, Rose told Nathan she was pregnant. His joy was so overwhelming that he picked her up and spun her around before remembering he should probably be more careful. Rose laughed at his instant transition to protective husband, but she was touched by his care. The pregnancy was relatively easy despite the growing summer heat. Rose continued her work in the house, but allowed Nathan to hire help for the heavier tasks. He was constantly hovering, making sure she rested enough, ate enough, did not do too much. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Rose told him one afternoon in June, but she was smiling. "You are carrying our child," Nathan replied. "That is the most important job in the world right now." Their son was born in late September of 1879, arriving with the first cool breezes of fall. The labor was long and difficult, and Nathan paced outside the bedroom for hours while the midwife from Tucson attended Rose. When he finally heard his son's first cry, he sagged against the wall in relief. The midwife called him in, and Nathan approached the bed slowly, almost afraid he was dreaming. Rose looked exhausted but radiant, cradling a small bundle in her arms. "Meet your son," she said softly. Nathan looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect. "He is beautiful." "He has your nose," Rose observed. "Poor child," Nathan joked weakly, but he was crying, overwhelmed by the sudden fierce love he felt for this tiny person. They named him Noah Kane, and he became the center of their world. Nathan had never imagined he could love anything as much as he loved Rose, but watching her with their son opened new depths of feeling. She was a natural mother, patient and nurturing, and Noah thrived under her care. As Noah grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Nathan expanded the herd and began breeding horses as he had always planned. Rose kept the books and managed the household, somehow balancing motherhood with all her other responsibilities. They hired a young woman from Tucson to help with the heavier housework, giving Rose more time to focus on Noah and the business side of the ranch. In the spring of 1881, when Noah was 18 months old, Rose found out she was pregnant again. This time she carried with more confidence, and their daughter was born in early November, a much easier birth than Noah's had been. They named her Naomi, and she had Rose's auburn hair and Nathan's dark eyes. Noah was fascinated by his baby sister, toddling over to pat her gently and bring her his favorite toys. The house they had expanded was now full of life and laughter. Nathan added more rooms as the children grew, creating a home that could accommodate the large family they both wanted. Rose's gardens flourished, providing vegetables for their table and flowers to brighten the house. The ranch hands became honorary uncles, teaching Noah about horses and cattle as he got older. In 1883, their third child arrived, another boy they named Nicholas. The house rang with children's voices, and Nathan often found himself stopping in the middle of his work just to marvel at the life he had built with Rose. One evening in the summer of 1884, they sat on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors. Noah, now almost 5, was playing in the yard with one of the ranch dogs. Naomi was asleep on Rose's lap and Nicholas was drowsing against Nathan's chest. "You remember the day we met?" Rose asked quietly. "Every detail," Nathan replied. "You were hiding under my porch trying to escape the heat. You looked so determined to survive." "I was terrified," Rose admitted. "I thought I had made terrible decisions and ruined my life. I had no idea that the worst thing I had been through was actually leading me to the best thing that would ever happen to me." Nathan reached over and took her free hand. "I am glad you chose to walk this direction that day. I am glad you were stubborn enough to keep going even when the heat was killing you. I am glad I noticed the flash of your dress under the porch." "Fate," Rose said softly, "or providence, or just extraordinary luck." "Love," Nathan corrected. "That is what it was. Love waiting to happen." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. Nicholas stirred and murmured in his sleep, and Nathan adjusted his hold, pressing a kiss to the top of his son's head. Noah came running up the porch steps, breathless and happy, the dog at his heels. "Papa, can we go check the horses before bed?" he asked eagerly. "May we?" Rose corrected gently. "And yes, if you promise to go straight to bed afterward." "I promise." Noah grabbed Nathan's hand, pulling him up. Nathan carefully transferred Nicholas to Rose's arms and let Noah lead him toward the barn. They checked on the horses, Noah chattering about which one was his favorite and how he wanted to learn to ride soon. Nathan answered patiently, showing him how to approach the animals calmly, teaching him respect for creatures that were both powerful and gentle. When they returned to the house, Rose had put the younger children to bed and was waiting in the parlor. Nathan took Noah upstairs and tucked him in, listening to his prayers and answering his endless questions about the stars and the desert and everything else that filled a child's curious mind. Finally, with all 3 children asleep, Nathan and Rose had a rare moment alone together. They sat close on the sofa, Rose's head on Nathan's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "I love our life," Rose said quietly. "I love this house, our children, the ranch, everything we have built together. But most of all, I love you. You saved me that day, Nathan. You gave me shelter from more than just the sun." "You saved me too," Nathan replied. "I just did not know I needed saving. I thought I was fine living alone, focused on work, but I was only half alive. You made me whole." Rose lifted her head to kiss him, a slow, sweet kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their wedding day. When they pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you for walking 5 miles in the heat," he whispered. "Thank you for being brave enough to accept help. Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for seeing me," Rose whispered back. "Not just a woman in need of rescue, but a person worth knowing, worth loving." They sat together long into the night, talking and planning and dreaming as they always did. They discussed expanding the horse breeding operation, adding another room to the house for when the children got older, maybe taking a trip to St. Louis one day so Rose could see her old home with new eyes. The years continued to unfold in a pattern of seasons and growth. The children grew strong and healthy, learning the work of the ranch and the values their parents held dear. Noah became an excellent horseman, while Naomi showed a gift for numbers that Rose nurtured by teaching her the business side of ranching. Nicholas had his father's steady patience and his mother's kind heart. In 1887, when Noah was 8, Naomi was 6, and Nicholas was 4. Rose gave birth to twins, a boy and girl they named Nathan Jr., called Junior to avoid confusion, and Nora. The house was chaos and joy, filled with the sounds of children playing and learning and occasionally fighting as siblings do. Nathan expanded the ranch operations, hiring more hands as the herd grew. Rose's organizational skills proved invaluable as the business became more complex. Together, they navigated droughts and market fluctuations, good years and lean years, always supporting each other through challenges. As the children grew older, Nathan and Rose made sure they understood the story of how their parents met. They did not hide the difficult parts, how Rose had been deceived and left destitute, how Nathan had taken a chance on a stranger. They wanted their children to understand that life could be unpredictable and sometimes cruel, but that kindness and love could transform everything. Noah, who grew into a serious young man with his father's work ethic, once asked if Nathan had known right away that Rose was special. "I knew she was strong," Nathan replied thoughtfully. "I knew she was determined, but understanding that I loved her, that took time. Love is not always instant. Sometimes it grows slowly, built on respect and friendship and shared experiences. With your mother, every day showed me something new to love." Rose had similar conversations with Naomi, who at 10 was already curious about romance and marriage. "Did you ever regret not staying in St. Louis? Did you ever wish you had married someone wealthy instead of a rancher?" "Never," Rose said firmly. "Wealth without love is emptiness. Your father gave me something worth more than any amount of money. He gave me partnership, respect, and a love that has only grown stronger with time. That is wealth that matters." By 1890, Noah was 11 and starting to take on real responsibilities around the ranch. Naomi was 9 and kept meticulous records of the household accounts that Rose checked but rarely needed to correct. Nicholas at 7 was the ranch's unofficial animal healer, with a gentle touch that calmed even the most skittish horses. The twins, now 3, were into everything and kept everyone on their toes. Nathan was 38 and Rose was 34, both of them healthy and happy, their love deepened by years of facing life together. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative. They had celebrated successes and supported each other through losses, including the deaths of some of the original ranch hands who had been there since Nathan's father's time. Through it all, their love remained the foundation of everything they built. They still sat on the porch in the evenings when they could steal moments alone, watching sunsets and talking about everything and nothing. They still looked for each other across crowded rooms, sharing glances that spoke volumes. They still found joy in small moments. A shared cup of coffee before the children woke, a stolen kiss in the barn, the brush of hands in passing. One afternoon in the fall of 1891, Nathan was working on accounts in his study when Rose appeared in the doorway with a familiar look on her face. "You are pregnant again," he said, reading her expression. "I am," Rose confirmed, moving to sit on his lap. "Are you upset? We did say 5 might be enough." Nathan wrapped his arms around her, pressing his face to her neck. "I could never be upset about another child with you. Are you happy?" "Terrified and thrilled in equal measure," Rose admitted. "6 children, Nathan. We are going to have 6 children. We will manage. We always do." Their 6th child, a girl they named Nellie, was born in May of 1892, and Rose declared she was definitely done having babies. Nathan agreed. though secretly he would have welcomed more. Every child was a gift, a living symbol of the love he and Rose shared. As the older children entered their teenage years, Nathan and Rose had to navigate new challenges. Noah at 13 was torn between following in his father's footsteps and a desire to study veterinary medicine. Nathan encouraged him to pursue education, something Nathan himself had never had the opportunity for. Naomi at 12 announced she wanted to go to a proper school, not just the lessons Rose taught at home. They found a girls' academy in Phoenix that would take her as a boarding student. These changes were hard, seeing their children grow and begin to move toward their own futures, but Nathan and Rose supported each other through the transitions. They had always known that the goal of parenting was to raise children who could eventually stand on their own, even when it hurt to let them go. In 1895, when Noah was 16, he left for university in California to study veterinary medicine. Naomi, now 14, was thriving at her academy and talking about becoming a teacher. Nicholas at 12 was clearly going to take over the ranch one day, as he loved every aspect of the work and showed natural leadership abilities. The twins at 8 were inseparable, always plotting some adventure, while Nellie at 3 was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by everyone. Nathan was 43 now, with silver threading through his dark hair. Rose at 39 was still beautiful, her auburn hair showing only a few strands of gray. They had weathered 17 years of marriage, and their love had only grown deeper. One evening, after putting Nellie to bed and checking on the twins, Nathan and Rose found themselves alone on the porch again. It was a warm October night, similar to the one when they had married all those years ago. You ever think about how different our lives could have been? Rose asked, leaning against Nathan's shoulder. What if I had chosen a different direction to walk that day? What if you had not noticed me under your porch? I try not to think about it, Nathan admitted. The idea of a life without you is unbearable. I feel the same. Sometimes I wake up and think this has all been a dream, that I will open my eyes and be back in that boarding house in Tucson, alone and afraid with nowhere to go. Nathan tightened his arm around her. This is real, all of it. Our children, our ranch, our life together. You never have to be afraid again. I know, but I never want to forget how lucky I am, how blessed we both are. They sat quietly, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Inside the house, they could hear Nicholas helping the twins with their homework, his patient voice carrying through the window. We have done well, Nathan said softly. Our children are good people. The ranch is thriving. We have built something that will last beyond us. Your parents would be proud, Rose said. They built the foundation, but you expanded it into something remarkable. We expanded it, Nathan corrected. I could never have done any of this without you. You are the heart of everything good in my life. Rose turned to kiss him, and even after 17 years, the touch of her lips still made Nathan's heart race. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. I love you, Rose said simply. I love you too, always. The years continued to pass in a blur of activity and growth. Noah graduated from veterinary school and returned to Arizona Territory, opening a practice in Tucson while living at the ranch and helping Nathan with the animals. Naomi finished her education and did become a teacher, accepting a position at a school in Phoenix, but coming home for summers and holidays. Nicholas assumed more and more responsibility for the daily operations of the ranch, showing wisdom beyond his years. The twins, Junior and Nora, developed their own paths. Junior was fascinated by the business side of ranching and spent hours going over accounts and market reports with Rose. Nora wanted to be a writer, filling journal after journal with stories and observations. Nellie, as she grew, showed artistic talent, painting the desert landscapes with surprising skill. In 1900, when Arizona Territory was changing rapidly with new railroads and growing towns, Nathan was 48 and Rose was 44. They had been married for 22 years, and their love was the stuff of local legend. People in Tucson still told the story of how the rancher had found his wife sheltering under his porch and invited her into his life, transforming them both. Noah, at 21, married a young woman he met through his veterinary practice, bringing her to live at the ranch. Naomi, at 19, was being courted by a fellow teacher, and Nathan had to adjust to the idea of his daughter considering marriage. On the night Naomi brought her suitor home to meet the family, Nathan and Rose sat up late talking after everyone had gone to bed. "He seems like a good man," Nathan said reluctantly. "Respectful, hardworking, clearly adores her." "But she is still our little girl," Rose finished for him, squeezing his hand. "I know, but she is also a grown woman who has to make her own choices." "I want her to have what we have," Nathan said. "I want her to find the kind of love that gets stronger every year, that survives challenges and celebrates triumphs. I want her to find a partner, not just a husband. We can hope and pray for that, but ultimately it is her choice. All we can do is love and support her." Naomi married in the spring of 1901, and though it was hard to watch her leave, Nathan took comfort in knowing she was happy. Nicholas, at 18, had grown into a capable man who could run the ranch as well as Nathan himself. The younger children were all thriving in their own ways. As Nathan and Rose entered their 50s, they began to slow down, letting the younger generation take over more of the work. They spent more time together, taking rides out to their favorite spots on the ranch, the place where Nathan had proposed, the hill that offered a view of the entire spread. One afternoon in the fall of 1905, they rode out to the spring where they had gotten engaged 23 years earlier. The cottonwoods were turning gold, and the water sparkled in the autumn light. 27 years, Rose said, sitting beside Nathan on the grass where they had spread a blanket. "We have been together for 27 years. Best 27 years of my life," Nathan replied, pulling her close. "You remember what you said when you proposed? That you wanted a partner to build something with. I remember every word. We did it. We built an incredible life together. 6 children, all of them good people with bright futures. A ranch that is more successful than you ever imagined. A legacy that will continue long after we are gone." Nathan kissed her temple. "We did it together. That is what matters. Every success, every challenge, we faced it side by side." They sat by the spring for hours, reminiscing and dreaming. There were grandchildren now. Noah had 2 sons, and they talked about watching the next generation grow. They discussed what they wanted to do with the time they had left, trips they wanted to take, things they wanted to see. "I want to go back to St. Louis," Rose said suddenly. "I want to show you where I grew up, take you to places I remember. I have not been back since I left in 1878. That is 27 years. I want to see it again through older, wiser eyes." "Then we will go," Nathan promised. "Next spring, when the ranch is in good hands, we will take that trip." They made good on that promise. In April of 1906, Nathan and Rose took the train to St. Louis, their first trip away from the ranch together in all their years of marriage. It was strange and wonderful to explore a city that had been Rose's entire world as a young woman. She showed Nathan the house where she grew up, now owned by someone else. They visited her parents' graves, and Rose told stories about them that she had never shared before. They saw the church where she had worshipped as a child, walked the streets she had known. "It seems smaller than I remember," Rose said as they strolled along the Mississippi River. When I lived here, it felt like the whole world. Now I realize how much world there is beyond this city." "Do you wish you had stayed?" Nathan asked. Rose looked at him, her green eyes clear and certain. "Never. Not for a single moment. If I had stayed, I would have become someone I was not meant to be. Coming to Arizona, meeting you, building our life together, that is who I was always supposed to be." They spent 2 weeks in St. Louis before returning home to Arizona, which had become a state while they were gone. Arizona admitted to the Union in 1912. By then, Nathan was 60 and Rose was 56, their children all grown with families of their own. The ranch house that had once rung with the sounds of children now hosted grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Nathan and Rose became the family center, the ones everyone came home to, the foundation that held them all together. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. All 6 of them came with their families, filling the house and yard with 3 generations. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. At one point, Nathan and Rose slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand to their favorite spot on the porch. From there, they could see the celebration continuing, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren creating memories. "Look at what we made," Rose said softly, her eyes on the gathered family. "Look at what love made," Nathan corrected. "All of this started because I noticed a woman sheltering under my porch and decided to invite her inside. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Rose said. "The best decision was mine, when I accepted your invitation." Nathan laughed and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. They were old now, both of them moving slower than they once had, Nathan's hair completely silver and Rose's more gray than auburn. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Would you do it again?" Nathan asked. "If you could go back to that day, knowing everything that would happen, would you still walk those 5 miles in the heat?" "In a heartbeat," Rose said without hesitation. "Every moment of pain and fear was worth it because it led me to you. I would walk 100 miles in the heat if it meant ending up here with you, with this life we built together." "I love you," Nathan said. "I have loved you since that first day, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Rose replied. "Thank you for sheltering me. Thank you for inviting me into the shade of your life." They stood together on the porch as the sun set over the desert they both loved. Surrounded by family and held by love, the perfect ending to a story that had begun with one act of kindness on a blazing summer day 41 years earlier. As the stars began to appear overhead, their youngest great-grandchild, a little girl of 3, came running up to them. "Great-grandma, great-grandpa, tell us the story." Rose and Nathan exchanged glances, both smiling. They knew which story she meant. It was the family's favorite, told and retold at gatherings just like this one. They returned to the party and settled into chairs of honor that had been set up for them. The family gathered around, young and old, all wanting to hear the tale again. "It was July 1878, Nathan began, his voice still strong despite his years. "The hottest day I could remember. I had just ridden in from checking the fence line when I saw something I did not expect to see. A woman under the porch," several of the children chorused, having heard this story many times. "That is right," Rose continued, picking up the tale. "I was running from a bad situation and did not know where I was going. I only knew I had to keep moving. When I could not walk anymore, I found the only shade available under a stranger's porch." "And what did great-grandpa do?" one of the older grandchildren prompted, even though they all knew. "He invited me inside," Rose said, her eyes finding Nathan's across the circle of family. He offered me water and safety and kindness when I desperately needed all three. He gave me a job when I had nothing. And eventually, he gave me his heart. And she gave me hers, Nathan added. She taught me that a house is not a home without someone to share it with. She showed me that love is not about perfect circumstances or careful planning. Sometimes love is about taking a chance on a stranger and trusting that everything will work out. And it did work out, Rose finished. Better than I ever could have imagined on that terrible, wonderful day when I sheltered under this very porch. The family applauded, and the children clamored for more details, wanting to hear about the wedding and the early days of the ranch and all the other stories that made up their family history. Nathan and Rose obliged, taking turns telling stories as the evening wore on, and the celebration continued around them. They talked until the youngest children were asleep, and the older ones were yawning, until the party finally wound down and families began heading to bed, those who lived nearby heading home, and others settling into the many bedrooms of the expanded house. Finally, alone in their own bedroom, Nathan and Rose prepared for sleep in comfortable silence. They had shared this room for 40 years, had seen each other through every stage of life. There were no secrets between them, no hidden corners. They knew each other completely and loved each other still. As they lay down together, Rose curled into Nathan's side as she had done for decades. His arm came around her automatically, holding her close. "It was a good day," she murmured sleepily. "Every day with you is a good day," Nathan replied. "Such a romantic," Rose teased gently. "Even after all these years, especially after all these years, I know what I have. I know how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Rose said. "We found each other when we both needed finding. We built something beautiful together." They drifted off to sleep holding each other, surrounded by the home they had made and the family they had created, their hearts full of gratitude for the life they had shared. In the morning, they woke to find the house once again filled with the sounds of family. Grandchildren were playing in the yard. Their sons were discussing ranch business over coffee. Their daughters were helping prepare breakfast in the kitchen that Rose had made her own so many years ago. Nathan and Rose joined the organized chaos, accepting hugs and kisses, settling disputes between children, and simply enjoying the warmth of being surrounded by love. As the day went on and families began to depart, each one stopped to embrace Nathan and Rose, to thank them for the celebration, and to tell them how much they were loved. When the last visitors had gone and it was just them again, Nathan and Rose walked through their house, straightening up and reminiscing about the day. 40 years, Nathan said, pausing in the parlor where they had first confessed their feelings. "It seems like both a lifetime and no time at all." "I know what you mean," Rose replied, taking his hand. "Sometimes I still feel like that frightened girl you rescued. Other times I look at our grandchildren and cannot believe how far we have come." They ended up on the porch, as they so often did, watching another sunset paint the desert sky. The land stretched out before them, thousands of acres that Nathan's family had worked for generations and that their children and grandchildren would continue to steward. "No regrets?" Nathan asked, though he knew the answer. "Not a single one," Rose confirmed. "You?" "Only that I have just one lifetime to spend with you. I wish I could have a dozen more." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then we will have to make sure every moment of this lifetime counts," and they did. For the remaining years they had together, Nathan and Rose continued to love fully and live richly. They watched their family grow and change, celebrated weddings and births, mourned losses, and served as the steady foundation that held everyone together. when Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79 in 1931. Surrounded by family, his last words were, "I love you," spoken to Rose, who held his hand through the final moments. Rose lived another 5 years, spending that time organizing the family's history and stories, making sure that future generations would know where they came from and what their grandparents had built together. She spent time with each child and grandchild, passing on wisdom and love. When Rose died in 1936 at the age of 72, she was buried beside Nathan on the hill overlooking the ranch, the spot where he had proposed so many decades earlier. The whole family gathered for the service, and they told the story one more time, about the rancher who found a woman sheltering under his porch and invited her into the shade of his life, and how that one act of kindness had created a legacy of love that spanned generations. The ranch continued to operate, passed down through the family as Nathan and Rose had always intended. The house they had expanded and filled with love remained the family's gathering place. And every summer, on the anniversary of that July day in 1878 when Nathan found Rose beneath his porch, the family would come together to celebrate and remember the love story that had started it all. The story that proved that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a single act of compassion and the willingness to open one's heart to possibility.